Welcome back, Montreal Canadiens fans. It's been a little while, and once again, here come the Montreal Canadiens with 9 guys off the board in their 2025 draft class. And let's dig into exactly how this draft class broke down for them, because there are some interesting players in here. And leading the way, I don't think there are any more intriguing players in this year's entire draft than Alexander Geravsky. I can understand why some people would really believe in this guy. Geravsky is a player that I noted for the first time in September, October, something like that, as a guy that really popped to me watching Maxim Agafonov, a player who was drafted by the Seattle Kraken. But Geravsky is a player who is unbelievably skilled and creative, but really largely untested. Now, he did play in the KHL at the end of the year, and I thought he looked pretty solid. And I think if you're a team that really believes in the upside of the pure skill and creativity in a guy like Geravsky, I could see why you would see him as a first-round pick and a player worth trading up to get. He is a player where I liked him, but I feel like the hype train got a little bit out of control there for a little bit, but there's still a really intriguing player here for Montreal. I think he's a player that will need a longer development trajectory. I'd leave him in Russia for a few years personally. The only thing with Geravsky for me personally and why I had him lower than this is because over the years I've just learned to just not trust Eastern Conference Russian talents, especially now that they've split the conferences in half. Geravsky played in the silver division of the worst conference in Russian junior hockey, and the level of play there is just not very good. So he is largely untested over a big sample, and with the guys that have come out of the east coast of Russia over the years that I've really gotten behind, they do seem to be a little bit further behind where I think they are, and I think that's a testament to the level they play at. But at 34, I think this is a perfectly reasonable gamble to take. They can afford to trade stuff to go get a guy in the top 40 that they really like, and I really like Geravsky. In terms of how much fun I had watching him, he was better than 61st, which is where he was on my board, and in terms of pure fun factor, he probably is a first-round pick to me. Kudos to Montreal for taking a risk, and it could pay off. Next up at 69th, they took Hayden Papankis, and Papankis is a player that I've seen here and there over the course of the season, and this is another one of those project picks. He's tall and lanky, has some good skill, has an interesting foundation I think you can build on, but I'm not exactly sure where his upside is going to come from. He's a player that I really felt struggled a little bit with the puck on his stick and outside of open ice or one-on-one scenarios. His pass vision was a little bit questionable to me. I didn't really see a whole lot of defensive engagement in the games that I saw. Papankis was a player I didn't have ranked, but in terms of just size and skill combinations, I think you can build on this. And at 69th overall, I don't think this year there were a whole lot of players that I'd really be clamoring to put my name behind. There's a few that were floating around and went a little bit later than this, but Papankis is a solid bet. At 81st, they took Bryce Pigford. I've been watching Bryce Pigford since he was 16 by a funny coincidence. I actually had an NHL scouting director reach out to me and ask me what I thought of him as a little bit of a side project back when he was at that age, and I really saw a bit of an interesting offensive player. He was playing wing a little bit at that time in his career, but now he's gone back to defense and he's played at that position and just came back from a Memorial Cup run. Pigford is a player who really exploded this season, and honestly, I saw some good stuff in his game, but as a re-entry, he wasn't a guy that really moved the needle enough for me as a defenseman outside of the offensive zone that lended itself to being one of these guys that you can take a chance on. But the things he does really well are really good, and they were on display throughout the WHL playoffs and into the Memorial Cup. The kid has a cannon of a shot. He scored a ton of goals this year, and he can just blast hockey pucks, and I know from watching Montreal over the years that they are not afraid of drafting defensemen who can really hammer pucks or really play in the offensive zone and try to work around it outside the offensive zone. So if that's what you're really into, then I can't fault it. I might have gone a different direction here as well, but Pigford is not a bad player at all. For me, it's just a matter of getting his skating ability and his defensive play up to NHL standards, because the offensive ability, especially his shot, are really good. So interesting bet at 81st overall. Sure. Especially with him maybe being a guy that could go to college and you have a bit of a longer runway with him, and I think that it could pay off decently well. At 82nd overall, one pick later, they took Arcen Radkov. Now, Radkov's a goaltender that I have seen quite a bit. He is a player that is very young for this draft class, but also played a lot of games where he faced a lot of hockey pucks. This guy's team in front of him was not very good, and he stopped a lot of pucks, and for me, that's a pretty decent formula to at least bet on. I didn't really see see the athleticism, puck tracking ability, you know, the ability to stay in your net really, really well, that just kind of felt like a player that I'd want to bet on in net, but that can be coached into your game, I'm sure, and it seems like he's going to be leaving the team he was on last year. The numbers are there. He's big. He's really young, is one of those bigger goaltenders who allows the puck to hit him by taking up a lot of space in the net, and we'll see how that translates to the NHL, because I feel like the athleticism and technical know-how is really a must for NHL goaltenders these days, but you're drafting this guy to see what he's like at 25, in my opinion. All right, at 113th, they drafted a player who, if things go right, I think could be the steal of the draft in LJ Mooney. A couple of years ago, the Montreal Canadiens took a gamble at the end of the second round on Lane Hutson, and he just won the Calder Trophy. I'm not saying he's the Lane Hutson at forward, but the upside for LJ Mooney is insane. He's small. I get it. I can go on Elite Prospects and look at how small he is and go, yeah, he's too small. It's never going to work. He's too fancy. He's injured, blah, blah, blah. At 113th overall in terms of pure talent, I don't think there's a better player available. He plays with skill and intensity that, in combination, at his best, is absolutely unbelievably good. This is a player with a higher rate of hits and offensive zone turnover generation than almost everybody I tracked this year, which for a 5'7" player is a little bit of a surprise. This is a player who I think is pretty quick on his feet. He's very, very agile. And in a lot of ways, there are echoes of a Lane Hutson style of offensive player here. And I'm sure a guy like Martin St. Louis is kind of intrigued by that. LJ Mooney's passing ability is astoundingly good at times. His pinpoint saucer passes, finding open space, finding open men. I would just love to see him maybe tone down the possession time a little bit, work a little more off the puck, and try to find some scoring opportunities for himself, because one of the criticisms I would have of him is his shot volumes were really, really low at 5-on-5, but he's got an absolutely lights out shot. So being able to move the puck and defer to others a little more, and being able to shoot the puck himself a little bit more, I think he could be an astoundingly good hockey player over the next few years. I do think the injuries are a concern, and that's why I think he was available around this range, outside of the fact that he's not 6'5". There's a huge ceiling here. The floor is beneath the earth, but I think it's worth betting on, and you give him some time in college with a good program and a good coach, I think you'll be fine. Great player, great pick, pound for pound one of the best picks in the draft, potentially, in my opinion. At 145th, they drafted another good data goaltender guy in Alexis Korn. I saw a little bit of him towards the end of the year after noting just how good some of his data was. I feel similarly to him as I do about Radkov. He takes up a lot of the net, a lot of pucks hit him, he faced a pretty heavy workload, and you're gonna try to coach the more technical and subtle aspects of the position into his game over the next little while. We'll see what happens, but that's my read of him, and it's very similar to Radkov, so we'll move on. At 177th, they drafted Carlos Hondel, a German defenseman who played in Halifax this year. Hondel is a player that I saw early in the year, and I was really enamored with the skill level from the defensive position. He is a guy that loves to fake and juke off of the offensive blue line, work down the half wall, really push things offensively a little bit. Pretty much the rest of the story was a really mixed bag for me. Like, seeing him ranked in the top 100, top 50 from people was a little bit of a shock. I do think that there's something there. It's just going to be a matter of, similar to a Bryce Pigford, but maybe not to the same extent, working on that defensive side of the puck, working on that mobility. Physical game needs to come a ways, but you can at least identify some things in his game that are positive. And I would much rather bet on a player where you can identify something in their game right now as a real positive upside trait in their game, which I think Hondel has with his offensive zone play, and trying to develop the rest around it, rather than just drafting some blank slate guy who's just out there and big and trying to make them into something. I can at least see the trajectory for Hondel, even if I think the likelihood is a little bit limited, but it's 177th, so we'll move on. At 189th, they drafted Andrew McNeel, a player who was basically a spare defenseman in the OHL based on his usage down the stretch of the year. I had never seen this player before. I went and watched him. I came away not really thinking very much. He's a player that I think wants to play more like a guy like Carlos Hondel, but just doesn't have the skill level, the skating ability to quite get there right now. Not much of a physical presence in what I saw of him. This just seems to me to be a pick where they they looked at a scout from Ontario and said, who do you like? Let's just take a gamble on him, and McNeel came up. We'll see what happens. Better players went undrafted, but you believe in the kid, you believe in the kid. At 209th, they took Maxim Vig. Vig is a player that I also had never seen before, or at least never paid attention to. I have seen Cedar Rapids play a few times this year, but Vig never was really a guy that I was really focused on. After going back and watching him, a similar kind of vibe to a Bryce Pigford. There's a pattern with the type of defenseman I think Montreal seems to be going after. Vig is a player that gets around the ice okay. His defensive game I thought was a bit hit or miss, missing on checks, missing on stick checks, not using his lateral mobility to close out play along the boards and manage gaps particularly well. But when he had the puck on his stick and he was getting up the ice, there were some moments where I went, oh, that was kind of cool. He's historically scored quite a few goals for a defenseman, like a Bryce Pigford. He's a guy who I think shows some pretty good skill, stopping up, making shooting lanes for himself, using his hands really creatively. I could see him being a decent college defenseman, and it's one of the last picks in the draft, so you can't be too critical. While I may not see what they are as really, really valuable today, and they weren't really ranked for me, I've seen them before, and I can at least look at them and go, I see something in your game that you can build around, and I can't discredit Montreal for taking anybody that doesn't really check those boxes. Maybe Andrew McNeel, but at 189th, you're really nitpicking, right? I think Montreal did really, really well overall. I think they could have done better, in my opinion, making some better bets on some guys that I think maybe have a little bit more of a realistic upside or a floor that's a little bit more dependable, but I can at least see the strategy that they're going with, so I'm going to be giving them a 2D. That might seem a little harsh, but for me, I think trading up for an Alexander Geravsky, taking an LJ Mooney at 113th, taking a Bryce Pigford could pay off pretty well. If they get a goaltender out of Radkov or Cournoyer, it could pay off really well. But all of these players, I think, just have a wide likelihood of potential outcomes in their career. If everybody hits at 100%, this would be a 1C, 1D draft probably for me. But I do think it's a little bit riskier than a lot of other teams went this year. I respect it, and I like a lot of the players that they've drafted. But for me, the Montreal Canadiens, here and there, I might have nitpicked things a little bit differently, aimed a little higher in some places. There were also players here where I just didn't have a great sample on them, but at the end of the day, good draft from Montreal. It's another really solid group of players to add to their gigantic stable of young talent. Something will come out of this draft, I think, and it could be really, really good. And I could look back on this and go, I was too pessimistic about these guys, but I still feel like there's quite a bit of risk. Don't get me wrong, it's not like I don't like these players. It was a good class. Montreal Canadiens fans should be really excited on a certain level about at least a handful of the guys they picked. A quick note before we finish today's video, I just wanted to mention, we are at 9,600 subscribers, give or take. Getting to 10,000 before next season would mean the world to me. So if you are not subscribed, which about half of our viewers aren't, I would suggest subscribing because I'm biased, but we have some good content coming, and our live shows twice a week are really fun. We get to talk about hockey, we talk about whatever else you want, we can talk about the time I ate an onion, we can talk about the future of the sport, we can talk about the current state of the NHL, and we just try to have some fun a couple times a week, and it's always great to see people come by. Thanks to everybody who already is subscribed. Let's get to 10K. That's a nice little project for us to do now. And with that, we're going to call it. If you liked the video, definitely like and subscribe. If you really liked it, definitely consider a subscription over at Scouching.ca, where you can get access to all kinds of fun data tools and our Discord server and plenty of other fun stuff that you're just not going to find anywhere else on the internet. So check that out at Scouching.ca. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.